Hey, this is Kelly from paperbeadrollers.com. Now, the other week in the Paper Bead Fanatics Facebook group, a member had found a picture of a Christmas tree made from paper beads and posted it in the group, and people just went wild over it. They thought it was the coolest thing ever, especially because the original person had made it with leftover paper beads they had in their stash. So something that you can do with beads that you've had laying around for a while and you just haven't been able to figure out what to do with them. So I decided to go ahead and put my own spin on it and make a tutorial for you guys to follow. So here is my version of the paper bead Christmas tree. Now, I didn't have enough leftover paper beads because I used mine up pretty quickly, but I made this with some leftover scrap paper I had laying around. If you already have beads created to use for this, you can do this whole thing in under an hour. And since we're so close to Christmas right now, that is a good thing. So let's get started and I'll show you how to make one. The tools and supplies you need for this project are about 400 1/2 inch paper beads, a styrofoam cone, some flexible wire, doesn't matter the exact gauge, and some wire cutters. You'll also need some cardstock to make the top and bottom of the tree. I'm using gold, a glue gun, possibly some white glue, and scissors. Now, I wasn't sure exactly how much wire and how many beads I was going to need to cover this cone, but I started with 10 feet of wire because it's the longest length I could easily work with. It ended up covering about half the cone, so I did this in 2 parts. I bend the end of my wire so my beads don't fall off the end, and then it's time to string. Now I have about 400 1/2 inch beads, and I didn't glaze them for a few reasons. Firstly, because that would take more time than I had to create this tutorial. It's pretty close to Christmas right now. And secondly, I think I'll like the look of the project this way rather than having a shiny glaze look. Now, if I decide later that I want a glaze to protect it over the years, I can always glaze the beads as they sit, and that will actually help hold everything in place. To make these beads, I used several patterns and shades of green that I had left over in my paper stash. Now, the person who originally posted this idea on Facebook used random leftover beads that they already had in their stash. And the members of Paper Bead Fanatics on Facebook thought that was a great idea. If that's the case, your tree won't be a traditional Christmas color, but it's still gonna look beautiful. Now notice that I'm not stringing the beads in a specific order. I'm just putting them on the wire randomly. Now if I ordered them, I'd end up with a kind of pattern up and down the tree, and I don't want that. I want it to be a random patchwork of beads. Plus, I don't have the same amount of each pattern anyway, because this is just scrap paper that I had left over. Okay, I've got all 10 feet of wire covered in beads, and I've used about half my bead stash, so 200 beads. I'm going to start by pushing the end of the wire into the foam to secure the first bead in place. Then I'm just going to wrap it around. Now I thought about hot gluing these into place, but I decided against it. Since I don't know exactly how many beads this will take, I may need to adjust my rows up or down. Plus, I am really messy with a hot glue gun, as I'm sure you'll see in a minute. Now that the first strand is on, I can see it covers about half my tree. I'll string another strand of wire about 8 feet long, and we'll use that to wrap the top. Now I'm going to secure the end right up against the first end and start wrapping. At the top, I'll secure this in place while I make the top and bottom of the tree. for the tree star, I used a free SVG file you can download from the internet, and I cut the star out with my brother's scan and cut machine. Now, if you don't have a cutting machine, don't worry, you can still do this project. The shape is very simple to cut out by hand. Just download the file from tryit-likeit.com. I'll put the exact link down in the video description. You can print the file out on your printer and cut it by hand or use your cutting machine. Once you have the star cut out, you can fold these tabs in. I like to go ahead and fold each of the points as well. Then you can glue the two stars together. Now we'll let that dry and work on our top and bottom caps. On the back of my remaining gold cardstock, I'll trace the bottom of the cone. I'm going to make another circle outside of my traced one that is 3/4 of an inch larger. This is where I'm actually going to cut out the circle. Now I'm going to divide the circle into roughly spaced pie shapes. This is where I'm going to cut the edge up to that inner line so that I can fold this up around the cone, kind of like a cupcake wrapper. I'm going to put the top on first. Now you might have to unwrap your beads a little bit to get this in place. Hot glue the circle to the top and then work your way around the edges, pressing each piece into the styrofoam using the hot glue. Then just put your beads back in place. I'll do the bottom the same way. Put glue around the circle. And then just press in the sides, putting in hot glue and making sure they sticks down so it stays on the foam. Now this is going to give your tree a really nice base, and it's going to cover up any of the styrofoam peeking through under your first row of beads. Gives you a little wiggle room with how many beads you've got. Okay, time for the star on the top. It's dry and stuck together. So I'm going to take a piece of this wire and just loop it over to create a space where I can hot glue it to the inside of the star. You just stick it in here. There we go. And now we can just use the wire to poke the star on the top of the tree. Looks like I'm going to have to poke a hole in this little top cap first. My wire doesn't want to go through it. And there we go, a lovely paper bead Christmas tree to use for years to come. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to see more crafty tutorials. Until then, happy rolling.